I'm David McRae. I'm a health promotion professional in Geelong.
Great. You're a naturopath?
Oh, I'm a Bachelor of Science in Medical and Biological Sciences and also a counsellor.
Great. And how long have you been practising these?
I was a naturopath in the old days too.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's great. And
Yeah.
how long have you been practising these skills?
For the last 20 years.
Victorian health authorities claim that governments and health professionals have a responsibility to make decisions that balance the best possible community health outcomes with individual choices. Water fluoridation, they claim, is an important public health measure which merits mandatory implementation. In your view, David, what are the ethical implications of mandatory water fluoridation?
The public health officials who claim that are really getting it wrong. They like to link it with wearing seatbelts and helmets on bicycles. Now, nobody ever has to swallow a seatbelt or a bike helmet. Forcing the whole community, on the other hand, mandatory water fluoridation, forcing every man, woman and child to drink a potentially very toxic chemical in fluoride, that's a completely different thing. And that's way outside of the scope of what's ethical for public health officials. See, fluoride added to water is a medication. They add it for the purpose of combating a disease. That makes it a medication. Now, not even a single doctor can force a single patient to take a medication. They have to get the consent of the patient. So for example, for Dr. Carney in Victoria, the Chief Health Officer, to claim that he has the right to force millions of people in Victoria to swallow fluoride medication every day via their kitchen tap, that's way, way outside of his, what his ethical powers should be. It's simply wrong.
The National Health and Medical Research Council recommends 3 compounds for fluoridating drinking water: sodium fluoride, sodium fluorosilicate and fluorosilicic acid. The latter 2 of these chemicals, silica fluorides, are the most widely used in Australia. Have silica fluorides ever been proven safe for long-term ingestion by humans, and where are they sourced from and how?
The silica fluorides, that's fluorosilicic acid and the sodium salt of it, they're nowadays sourced from the phosphate fertiliser industry, down here in Geelong from Incitec Pivot Fertilisers. They're a waste product from manufacturing the fertiliser. After the rock's crushed and boiled up in sulfuric acid, the waste fumes that would normally go out the chimney stack would carry a huge amount of fluoride. But they capture it in the wet scrubbing system, the pollution scrubbing system, and those tanks of captured pollution effluent are then what's sold to water authorities for putting into water supplies as fluoridation. So it's really a raw, unpurified pollution extract from industry, which is really unfortunate because they're contaminated as well. I mean, they're 90% fluoride, but they also contain mercury, arsenic, lead and other very, very toxic heavy metal contaminants. But the other part of your question was about testing for safety. No, those silica fluorides have had, to the best of my knowledge, no safety testing at all. And by that I mean the kind of safety testing that's required for medical drugs. They've never gone through that process. In the US, they've never been approved by the FDA for human administration. And in Australia, the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, has never undertaken any testing at all. So government relies on vague claims like, well, we don't see people dropping dead in the street when we fluoridate a town, so therefore it must be safe.
But surely there's is it a cumulative toxin, or does it get eliminated out of the body?
Fluoride is cumulative. You can eliminate, a healthy person can eliminate about half of what they ingest per day. The rest is stored in bones or affects thyroid gland, pineal gland and a few other body systems. But a person with poor kidneys eliminates less than half, almost none. So people with kidney disease are at especially great risk of toxic effects from fluoride.
Yes, because surely the teeth being the hardest surface of the teeth would be the last to show the effects of fluoride, and in the meantime the fluoridated water would be circulating through all the soft tissues. Would that be correct?
That's right, yeah. I mean, it's especially stored in the hard tissues, but it's ridiculous to think that it could flow around the body and somehow bypass your thyroid gland or your stomach. It doesn't. It hits those areas as well. You get sensitive people get immediate stomach problems with damage to the lining of their stomach and intestines. And as we know, the thyroid gland is very, very much damaged by fluoride. It interferes with the use of iodine in the thyroid gland.
Victoria's Chief Health Officer Dr. Carney claims that the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities allows for reasonable limitation of individual rights. He also claims that because of the public health importance of water fluoridation in reducing dental decay, the practice of fluoridation of drinking water supplies is consistent with the Charter. David, do you agree that mandatory water fluoridation merits reasonable limitation of individual rights?
Oh, no, Dr. Carney's getting that completely wrong. The man's really a disgrace in the position of Chief Health Officer. The Charter of Rights very, very clearly explains that medication should not be given to people without their informed consent. It's as simple as that. And he cannot claim that the benefits are so great when we, for example, look at Queensland, that was never fluoridated except for a couple of small towns until 2009, and yet right through the 1980s, 1990s and the early 2000s, the tooth decay rates for all ages in Queensland were no different to Victoria and New South Wales that had been fluoridated for 20 and 30 years. So there is no evidence for benefits. And then look at Europe, Switzerland, Sweden, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, France, all the countries across Europe that do not fluoridate their water generally have lower tooth decay rates than these fluoridated states in Victoria. So no, Carney's got no grounds at all for saying there's such a big benefit that it's worth overriding normal human rights. He's quite wrong about that.
So bringing back to Europe being non-fluoridated, is that a banned product, or is it legal and still used as tablets, or is it completely banned as a neurotoxin?
Look, it varies from country to country. A number of countries in Europe did ban it and create legislation to ban it. Other countries, their official statement from the Health Ministry is simply that they don't use it. They believe it's too toxic to many unresolved health problems, and that it does violate people's human rights.
So why do you think Australia's gone ahead and fluoridated every water supply in the country?
Well, Australia got started back in the 60s when it was sort of a flavour of the year. In America, Australia and even some European countries did start back then, but those countries quit. None of them kept with it for very long. I can't for the life of me work out, aside from the fact that the big industries that sell the stuff, they promote it very heavily, and in the early days of fluoridation they pumped a lot of money into supporting dental researchers who would come out with findings that fluoridation was good. They would lose their funding if they didn't. But that's going back earlier in the history. What keeps it going in Australia now, I won't speculate on that.
It's going against modern scientific thought, really, that fluoridation is no longer considered safe and effective. Could you perhaps expand on the safe and effective clause that we're constantly hearing?
Well, I've just mentioned that it's not effective because you only have to look at comparisons of states that fluoridate and don't, and countries that fluoridate and don't. But as for safe, well, of course it can't be safe when there's no control over the dose. Now, no one disputes that fluoride is very toxic. Dr. Carney's defence of it is that the amounts you get through fluoridated water are small enough that they're not toxic. But think about it for a minute. Some people might only drink 2 glasses of water a day, or not even any. Other people have high thirst levels. They'll drink 5, 10, 15 glasses of water a day. Some people do a lot of fried and baked food, so there's no tap water in their food. Others do a lot of soups and stews and watery cooking. So the range of fluoride intake from fluoridated water can vary up to 10-fold. Now, can you imagine your doctor giving you a very dangerous drug and saying, take as much as you want, take 1 tablet one day, 10 another day, I don't care. In fact, you're getting fluoride all day long, because it's not just the glass of water that you take from the tap. It's every time you cook rice or a stew or soup, every one of those has fluoride in it. Every cup of tea or coffee from the boiled kettle has concentrated fluoride in it. So you're getting the stuff all day long. Yes, so if you're taking in a lot every day, you're accumulating a lot in your body.
In 2007, the National Health and Medical Research Council released a report titled A Systematic Review of the Efficacy and Safety of Fluoridation. According to Professor Paul Connett, Emeritus Professor of Environmental Chemistry, St. Lawrence University, USA, the NHMRC report, quote, is being cited around the fluoridating world as the final word on the safety and effectiveness of water fluoridation. However, as far as addressing health concerns, a careful reading of this report indicates that at best it is a work of professional incompetence, or at worst an example of scientific fraud in which scientific information is manipulated to support a preordained conclusion. End of quote. These are strong words. It would seem that not all scientists agree that water fluoridation is completely safe and effective. What are your views on the NHMRC report? And do you believe it addresses all fluoridation health concerns adequately?
No, it doesn't. It was a report whipped up by 2 report writers in Sydney, a small company, who were contracted by the NHMRC. They made a number of very big errors, and one of them was to leave out any studies on fluoride's effect on kidneys or the effect of fluoride on kidney patients. Now, they were supposed to include a section on that. I've seen minutes of meetings where kidney fluoride studies were to be included, but in the final report they were mysteriously eliminated. When it came to the cancer studies, particularly Dr. Basson's study of osteosarcoma and fluoride being responsible for osteosarcoma, they dismissed that in about 3 lines, based upon a letter to the editor written by Professor Chester Douglas, who said that there will later be other reports coming out of his office that will show that Basson's study wasn't correct. Well, it's now 5 or 6 years after that time, and Dr. Chester Douglas has retired and he never produced these reports. So the NHMRC relied on a very flimsy letter to the editor in order to make their claim that there's no link between fluoride and cancer. So to this day, Basson's studies showing that young boys have a much higher incidence of osteosarcoma if they're exposed to fluoridated water. That is the best science that's ever been done on the subject. Yet the NHMRC dismissed it for no good reason.
Unbelievable. When we see these rising cancer rates and they refuse to look at perhaps a cause as being water fluoridation as a toxic chemical and like a neurotoxin, and yet they dismiss.
Oh, it is unbelievable, because you would expect a body like Australia's NHMRC to have the highest standards of scientific integrity, but it's become apparent from just the 2 examples I've given, the kidneys and the bone cancer, that they had a goal to whitewash fluoridation and not to do a proper fearless study of the pros and cons.